Good evening, everyone. Welcome to your Danville City Commission regular meeting for this evening, Monday, September 23rd, 2019. The hour is 5:30, and I'll call us to order and ask that we be led in a moment of prayer by Commissioner Kevin Cottle.
Thank you. Bow if you want to. Heavenly Father, once again, we're lucky to be gathered here as neighbors to discuss the business of the city, and we would ask that you help us to remember we are neighbors and we all are striving for the same goal. We ask you to be with those who are overseas or first responders here and those who may be ailing or grieving in some way, and we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. So as you know, I kind of have a little bit of fun picking someone out of the audience to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight, that lucky person was one of the early attendees tonight, Miss Debbie Wagner. Debbie, would you come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Are you familiar with Debbie at all? You know it?
Up here, yes.
I got this. Thank you so much. Let's lead our pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, while we're waiting, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been in Danville for about 30 years or so. I work at the Wilderness Trail Distillery. I'm the HR manager there, and I'm pleased to be here tonight representing our Kiwanis Club of Danville.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get your pen? J.H. got a pen for you.
Debbie and I spent 3 years in third grade together.
Commission, you've had the agenda since Friday. I've heard no changes, so I'll assume it meets with your approval and move right along. We're going to move right into the public. The section the public can speak for 3 minutes on any subject that is on tonight's agenda. There'll be an opportunity later on to do the same on subjects that are not on tonight's agenda. Anything on tonight's agenda that you want to talk about? Seeing not, we'll move right along to the item 1, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting being September 19th, September 9th, let me back up. September 9, and September the 11th. Do I hear a motion to approve or amend?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the previous 3 meetings.
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 2 is the banner request for the Kiwanis Club Charity Chili Cook-Off. You all are welcome to address anything, but I'm going to ask staff if the banner meets our normal requirements.
Yes, sir, it does.
Then Chair will entertain a motion to approve that.
I'll move for approval.
Motion
Second.
made and seconded. Thank you all. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Would one of you all or both of you all like to come up and free advertising?
Especially the date.
Yeah, Robert, she did her thing. Your time.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's on.
This will be the 3rd annual cook-off that we've done, and it helps fund the children and the seniors programs that we do for Christmas. So we've been very fortunate to have our major distillery here in the area help us with this. They've been gracious to us. The tickets are $10 to attend the event, and then we also have sponsors that have been gracious to help us with underwriting the cost and build a fundraising from it. So we try to keep it simple and have it good for the area, and appreciate the visibility that you all have afforded us. So.
When is it, Robert?
It'll be October 19th. I'm getting my years mixed up here. Saturday, October 19th, and runs from, we have 11 to 3, correct? Okay, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. Item 3 is the National Breast Cancer Awareness Month and a proclamation. And I'm going to ask my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Terry, who is a cancer survivor, if she would indulge us with the reading.
Whereas the month of October has been set aside as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, a time to educate women and men on the importance of early detection of breast cancer. And whereas this disease is the second most commonly diagnosed cancer in women and men in the U.S., and the second leading cause of cancer death in women, with an estimated 250,000 new cases of invasive breast cancer expected to be diagnosed among women and men in the U.S. this year. On average, one woman is diagnosed every 2 minutes. And whereas October 18th, 2019 is National Mammography Day, and early detection of treatment can save lives. We encourage all women and men to find out if they are at increased risk by completing the necessary screenings. And whereas, although statistics are staggering, we are encouraged that survival rates have drastically improved due to increased awareness and innovative advancement in early detection and treatment. Whereas we encourage everyone to display their support of National Breast Cancer Awareness Month by displaying bold pink ribbons, showing support for breast cancer survivors, and reaffirm our commitment to raising awareness of the disease and as a symbol of hope. Now therefore be it resolved that Mayor G. Michael Paris and the City Commissioners of the City of Danville on this 23rd day of September 2019 do hereby proclaim October as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and encourage all residents to celebrate life beyond breast cancer by supporting and attending events in the city that recognize breast cancer awareness during the month of October and throughout the year.
Do I hear a motion that we accept the proclamation?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Sears and Commissioner Atkins. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign.
Is there someone to receive this?
Is there anyone here to receive that?
No? Okay.
Okay.
I'll see if I can't find somebody to give that to.
All right. Next is a proclamation for Fire Prevention Safety Month. Do we have anyone here for that? Chief Flug, front and center. Whereas the City of Danville, Kentucky is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Danville, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire, and whereas the majority of U.S. fire deaths, 4 out of 5, occur at home each year, Danville citizens should identify places in their home where fires can start and eliminate those hazards. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half, and Danville citizens should install smoke alarms in every sleeping room, outside each separate sleeping area, and on every level of the home. And whereas Danville's citizens should listen for the sound of the smoke alarm, and when it sounds, respond by going outside immediately to the designated meeting place. And whereas the Danville Fire Department is dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas Danville citizens are responsive to public education measures and are able to take action to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2019 Fire Prevention Week theme, quote, "Not every hero wears a cape. Plan and practice your escape," close quote, effectively serves to remind us that we need to take personal steps to increase our safety from fire. Now therefore be it resolved that Mayor G. Michael Paris and the City Commissioners of the City of Danville on this 23rd day of September 2019 do hereby proclaim October as Fire Safety Prevention Month throughout Danville, and urge all citizens of Danville to be aware of their surroundings, look for available ways out in the event of a fire or other emergency, respond when the smoke alarm sounds by exiting the building immediately, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of the Danville Fire Department during Fire Safety Prevention Month. Thank you, sir. Any words of wisdom?
Just want to make sure everybody's aware that those that have kids will be visiting all the schools this coming month and talking to them about these same issues, and you'll probably be hearing from them when they come home talking to you. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to contact my office at 238-1211, and I'll be glad to talk to you about anything fire safety or life safety involved. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief. Do I hear a motion to accept the proclamation?
I move that we accept the Fire Safety Prevention Month proclamation.
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Cottle. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the proclamation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 5 will be amendments to the zoning ordinance presentation. Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, guys. Just give you a quick summary, and then I guess we just more got a scheduling issue to discuss. What you have before you is the second phase of the zoning ordinance amendment. And what you should have in your packet, I'll just tell you what you have in your packet if you haven't dug through it yet. Should be a recommendation letter that went to Mr. Scott. Should be the new text, and it's titled Recommendation Draft. It's gone through lots of different drafts. There should be the old text, and so the new text is underlined, the old text is complete and strike through. And then there should be 3 sets of minutes that went out with the packet, because we had this hearing over 3 different months at the Planning Commission. And there may be some other stuff in there. Just a quick summary. You remember when we did the first phase of the ordinance in March or April, something of that nature. It went into effect May the 1st. I mentioned that we were doing the easy stuff, Articles 1, 2, 3, and 6. The whole ordinance was sort of worked on last year between Thanksgiving and Christmas, over 30 or so hours. And when we discussed with Mr. Scott after the Christmas break, we decided to take on, kind of break it into pieces and bring you guys it and bring it to you in different pieces, as well as the Planning Commission decided to maybe take it up as Phase 1 and Phase 2. So again, we did the easy stuff first. And this stuff's not really harder, but it's more complicated. There's more to it. This is what really changes the ordinance. Brings a lot of new techniques into play. So what we thought about doing, as opposed to just going through a summary right now, which would take as much time as you guys wanted to take, or if I tried to go through it fast, probably at least be an hour. The idea was to, let's try to, as opposed to do it in this meeting, set up a work session to walk through you guys page by page if we need to, and do the same with fiscal court. We're meeting tomorrow and discuss that with them. I think that'd be a better way to sort of bring up to speed on what's all in this phase of Articles 4, 5, and 7, which is the standards, the parking, the landscape, signage, all the uses, conditional use permits, all the things that we do basically in zoning are kind of in this section. One other quick summary I just want to mention, this phase went out to the Planning Commission in early May and to the media. And then the Planning Commission staff met with builders, the sign companies, property owners. The chamber had an event where they invited all their membership to talk about signs. We met with engineers, surveyors, just whoever. Solar panels came up, and we got a provision now about solar panels in a residential setting. We met with the solar panel companies. So there's just a lot of folks we talked to. We introduced the document in June, and we had a pretty good discussion, and then we tabled it. Came back in July, talked some more, tabled it again, came back in August, more discussion. Had a lot more people in the room that are here tonight for that August room was packed. And the main reason was because the staff took a shot at changing the pipeline language that was in the old ordinance. And there was a lot of debate back and forth on whether we should have or what we should have done. But we were talking with Mr. Tom Fitzgerald in Louisville about that, about specific things we wanted to put in there to strengthen the pipeline language. When he ended up coming to the hearing and pretty much said he agreed with the new kind of way we're going to address the pipeline, no one really else in the crowd spoke, and everyone, I think, supported the change that we were putting forward for the pipeline language. So the hearings actually went pretty good, pretty quick. I think we only spent 7 hours or so on all of this through the 3 meetings. So we're here to do whatever you guys want to do, or the city attorney, city manager wants to do to move this forward. This is a formal recommendation from the Planning Commission. It was passed 9-0. And so you guys, unfortunately, are under the zoning time clock. When you get recommendations, you have 90 days to act one way or the other. You could have a new hearing. You can concur, you can overturn it. But I think the most appropriate way in a major text amendment like this is, again, to maybe have a work session where we just walk you through the pages, walk through the changes, answer any questions, and then you all can give your attorney some kind of guidance on a first reading of some nature, up or down, or whatever you choose. I think that may be the best way to move forward, unless you guys want to dig into it tonight and you've got specific questions. I'd be glad to answer them now. There are also the 3 videos are on the YouTube channel, so you can get on there and watch the videos if you want to do that. If you want to see the hearings from one end to the other, you can get all of that if you want to do it that way too. And I'll defer to Mr. Scott or Mr. Dexter, or how you guys want to go from here, but I'm open to whatever you guys want to do.
I would suggest, in keeping with Mr. Hunter's recommendation, that we have a workshop that we agree to do so, and I would suggest as a date, October 2nd, Wednesday, which would be next week, perhaps mid-afternoon, at a time convenient for the City Commission and the public to attend.
I'll start by saying that works for me.
Thank you.
I'm fine. Whatever works for everybody.
What time are you thinking, like 3, 4?
Perhaps 3 o'clock.
Okay.
We've got something, we have to present some plaques at Center College at 4 o'clock.
Okay. How about Thursday, October 3rd? The problem is that the following week is fall break. We've got a myriad of other upcoming meetings too later in the month, and the idea is that we probably should get underway with this sooner rather than later, because we may have questions that might require a follow-up meeting or discussion.
How long are you going to be at your event?
I don't think that'll be long.
You want to push it to like 5 or 5:30?
We can do that.
What time you got to be at
Something
center?
like that.
What, you say you got to be at center at 4 o'clock?
Yeah, they're receiving some plaques for preservation.
So perhaps we could have it at 5:30, our normal.
5 o'clock if you want.
What if we keep the 3 o'clock start time and just take a break while the mayor goes and does his thing, and then take right up? You need, what, an hour's break?
I don't think I'll need that.
Yeah, I prefer starting at 3 o'clock myself.
Yeah, Mr. Hunter, how long do you perceive needing to review the text amendments?
2 days.
I'm gonna keep it simple. I think I can hit the highlights in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then it's just questions. And it really comes down to how much you guys study up on it or read it. You may have something specific. Hey, I don't know why that's in there. I got a question about that. I think we get it done in an hour, or we can stop and pick another date if that's what y'all need to do.
And you can start at 2:30 and agree to end by, 3:45.
Or should we?
I mean, I can't imagine digging into text amendments of a planning and zoning ordinance for more than an hour is my point for you, as far as being able to walk away with a sound mind at the end of it. And you may have questions at another meeting. This may just be the first meeting where you really dig into it and then find your discussion more appropriate at a future meeting, maybe a regularly scheduled meeting where we have a first reading of the ordinance on, and then you can ask your questions or make revisions to that first reading.
I had a conflict in the morning, but that got switched to 1, if anyone would want to shoot for the morning.
On the second,
Uh-huh.
fine with me.
Or we can,
I can do the morning.
No, we have a meeting. That's what we're saying. We got a meeting that was in the morning that we're both on that's been moved to 1.
it's been moved to 1, yeah.
Which will be in there.
So-
We'll be in an hour.
Y'all be finished by 2 o'clock though, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Give us a reason to leave,
Is it right here?
whatever
It
y'all
is,
want.
yeah.
Or working lunch.
What's your schedule, Mr. Beck, on that day?
Can you do morning?
No, I'd put down from 3 to 6 on all 3 proposed dates myself, so I could do it 11 o'clock, 11:30 if you want. Make it better if it makes it better for everyone.
Yep. There it is. 11:30 on Wednesday the 2nd.
Does that work for you?
Perfect. Yeah, whatever works for the group.
It's kind of important for you to be there.
You got all the stuff, actually. And there's a lot there. We're meeting fiscal court tomorrow, and then I think, got to get on the road, go to Perryville. We're doing the same thing in all the governments. So want to kind of tie these together, and if one issue's raised in one government, we want to make sure we mention it fiscal court or Perryville.
Okay.
Works for me.
Thank you.
A lot of work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right, item 6 will be staff recommendations on Parks and Recreation. Mr. Scott.
Yes, sir. We have a staff report to make to you tonight regarding what we believe is a structure that would lead to long-term success in our community on Parks and Recreation. This comes after much reflection and many years of effort in terms of improving Parks and Recreation. We distributed that report to you ahead of the meeting. Perhaps, as I have a rather lengthy, another topic coming up immediately, I would ask Stephen Dexter, our counsel, to review this with you at this time.
Thank you. The recommendation before you is a culmination of years of study and thought and perspective that essentially tries to answer this policy question, which is what is the best format and structure to deliver high-quality recreational programming for our community and visitors that is responsible and accountable to the needs of the public. In order to answer that question, a brief background was provided to you, but staff deems it appropriate through the city manager to share a bit of that publicly as well, to provide a context for the recommendation that will be delivered. In early 2016, the City of Danville and the Boyle Fiscal Court held a joint meeting to discuss the status of Parks and Recreation in the community. And essentially, from that joint meeting, an ad hoc committee was formed with the charge that was to, quote, review the facilities, needs, structure, and other issues pertaining to Parks and Recreation in an effort to bring recommendations for improvement. That was affectionately referred to the ad hoc committee for quite some time. And after a recommendation from the ad hoc committee in 2017, January that is, the City of Danville independently engaged and paid $50,000 for a master plan that was conducted by Branstetter Carroll for Parks and Recreation. Branstetter Carroll thereafter commenced the work, conducted a host of meetings necessary to study the current state of affairs of our local parks and recreation system. Engaged parties were met with and had ideas that were floated to, and the result was a comprehensive master plan, which was completed late fall 2018 and presented to the Board of Commissioners and accepted by resolution January 14, 2019, so just earlier this year, and shared with the Boyle Fiscal Court immediately thereafter. The master plan made many recommendations, one of which was that the park system would thrive more under the leadership of a single public entity. Further discussions revealed that our park system had outgrown its current format, which was typical, a typical scenario as parks and recreation systems typically start out as joint city-county efforts or joint public agency efforts, and then as they grow to a certain size, they typically go under a single entity administration, which tend to be cities. And sometimes they reach the other end of the pendulum, which means they grow so big, such as Bowling Green and Warren County, where they operate two independent, fully independent parks and recreation systems, just due to their size. So Branstetter Carroll's recommendation included a recommendation that we should transition to a single entity system based on the growth of our park system. The city and county thereafter held another joint public meeting in February to discuss the current states of park and recreation and decided to appoint a second ad hoc committee to review the master plan and development recommendations for implementation to ensure continued success for parks and recreation in the community. That committee was comprised of Commissioners Cottle and Saris, as well as Magistrates Sammons and Ellis. That first meeting of the ad hoc committee took place on February 11th, 2019, and the members seemingly developed a consensus on numerous issues, one of which was in order to increase efficiency, accountability, and responsiveness, that Parks and Recreation should be operated and administered as an entity, as a department rather, of the city. And that the city and county should enter into a service agreement similar to the one that we entered into for 911 services, and in a manner in which solid waste and emergency management services are coordinated in our community. To properly outline the roles and obligations of the parties, and also to define the financial obligations of both parties, specifically the counties at a level, quote, at a maximum annual amount not to exceed the current level of contribution, extending COLA adjustments. Other recommendations seemingly included that the Parks and Recreation Director would be hired by the city, and that the Parks Board would become an advisory committee, so as not to encumber those willing to serve on that committee with personnel issues, commercial contracting regimes, and financial management of significant tax dollars, which would allow it to focus on making recommendations on programming and implementation of the master plan and prioritizing capital needs. City Manager Ron Scott, Mayor Paris, Judge Executive Hunt all met to review the proposed recommendations and were in support of same. However, upon a final review of the aforementioned recommendations, they were seemingly agreed to by the ad hoc committee at the February 4th meeting. Magistrates Sammons and Ellis decided that they were not appropriate for the fiscal court to recommend on February 18th, 2019. So the ad hoc committee concluded its business without a formal recommendation that was voted upon. This Board of Commissioners reviewed those recommendations at its next meeting and approved them by resolution at the end of February 25th to be exact, and forwarded them to the full fiscal court for consideration on March 6th. An invitation to present a counteroffer was also presented to the court, but neither were approved and a counteroffer was not made, thus leaving the states of Parks and Recreation at bay. On April 15th of this year, the city and county held a third public joint meeting at which the current ordinances on Parks and Recreation were reviewed and commented upon. It was agreed that a new ordinance was needed in order, and that the city would draft a proposal that would be amendable by the county in order to determine what each governing body was willing to support financially and what efforts would constitute shared costs. Said ordinances were presented to the city in draft format on June 10th, 2019. The city proposed that both parties should finance in equal shares all programming costs, personnel costs, maintenance, capital expenditures in the Millennium Park, the trail system, and any other jointly owned park. It specified that maintenance and capital expenditures in parks owned by the city would be the city's responsibility, and those same costs for parks owned by the county would be their costs. However, it did allow for service agreements to be entered into for certain current or existing services or projects such as a pool. The draft ordinance also required an itemized Parks and Recreation bill that had 6 separate sections under proposed expenditures, separated as follows: programming costs, including maintenance of playing areas, personnel costs, proposed maintenance and capital expenditures for Millennium Park, proposed maintenance and capital contributions for parks or for the countywide trail system, proposed maintenance and expenditures for wholly owned city parks, and proposed maintenance and capital expenditures for parks solely owned by the county. On August 12th of this year, the fiscal court approved its own draft ordinance that was wholly separate from the city's proposed working draft and created a second working document. The proposal only agreed to share the cost of Millennium Park, thus excluding trails from consideration. It also created a budget schedule that was not feasible and did not align to the city's budget schedule, and further complicated the relationship by merely agreeing to regularly meet to try to agree on necessary expenditures in the future. So the conclusion of staff is that staff cannot recommend approval of a solution to Parks and Recreation that is not long-term, viable, and structured for success. The city has a broader vision for Parks and Recreation that includes not only Millennium Park, but for all of its other parks and trails, which are critical to the vibrancy of this community, as you, as a board, have stated. As it stands today, the city actually owns parks that exceed the acreage of Millennium Park by 1 acre. And the city cannot and should not be a party to an agreement that neglects such a large asset by failing to adequately program, maintain, and capitalize them. The city has a master plan ready for implementation that includes the development of the newly acquired fairgrounds property. And based on the foregoing, including the recommendation of Branstetter Carroll, it's the recommendation of staff to repeal the current joint ordinance of the city and county for Parks and Recreation effective December 31st, 2019, and implement a new ordinance creating a city department for Parks and Recreation and the position of Parks and Recreation Director with an advisory committee. This action would allow the city to provide more comprehensive Parks and Recreation experience and fully implement the master plan. This approach will further allow the city to better coordinate with its community partners in the development of its Parks and Recreation system, such as local school districts, other municipalities, and the potential for saving all of us taxpayers significant sums of money that otherwise are likely to be incurred. It would be the hope of the city that the fiscal court would continue to support Parks and Recreations in our community by entering into a service agreement that provides a financial contribution at an amount at its current level, such as the city and county each currently do for 911 services, solid waste management, and emergency management. Solid waste management and emergency management are each administratively run by the county, and the city solely provides funds by agreement for their departments, just as the city does for 911 services. So the staff recommendation is to replicate the models that work, and those being the examples. This action will allow the county to better determine its annual costs so as to focus on other endeavors. Additionally, the city is still willing to trade the county some of its newly acquired land at the fairgrounds for use as a county public works facility, if that should be so desired by the court. With that being said, attached to in your minute book tonight is actually our two ordinances. The first of which repeals the current ordinance that has been on the books, and the second ordinance is a replacement ordinance. So ordinance number 1 is an entire repeal. Ordinance number 2 would be effective January 1, 2020, and essentially creates an internal Parks and Recreation Department, an advisory committee that the city would view transitioning the current board to as of the date of effectiveness, as well as the creation of a Parks and Recreation Director position and associated staff necessary to run that department. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding this matter, as I'm sure city manager will as well.
Before we go into that, if Robert's Rules of Order says we need a motion and a second, and then we can enter into the discussion. My question would be, do you want to do it on both ordinances at once, or do you want to do it on separate?
I might ask for some clarification from the attorney. I think this came on the agenda as just a discussion. I don't know that we have to do that.
No, what is before you is staff's recommendation. Staff's recommendation would include an action requested. The action request would be a repeal of the current ordinance, a first reading, and a first reading on the replacement ordinance. Now, they have effective dates, some months out. However, staff believes that this is the best path forward and would request that there be action on them. However, I think we can discuss the recommendation without a motion, and then you can consider the future ordinances if that's your path. I think you're entitled to do that.
Yep.
Well, and I'll say this, Robert's Rules of Order are meant to be a guiding principle, And we discussed even originally that we won't be crippled or
Let me ask first.
drugged down by them.
Is there a motion that anyone wants to make?
Do we have ordinance numbers?
1938 for the repeal, 1939 for the enactment of the new ordinance.
I'd say that I'd like to go over the new ordinance and ask some questions and get some clarification before we repeal the old one. Repeal the old one, then we're stuck without an ordinance, or certainly a choice on the new one. But I'd feel better voting if I had some clarification. We went through that new ordinance, and I just have a few questions, and
Sure.
unless the four of you disagree with me.
I think if we're going to consider the text of the ordinance, we should have a motion to approve it. And that doesn't mean you have to vote on it, but it means there is a motion and a second. You could still have a motion to table it after the discussion.
And that's ordinance number 1939.
38 is the repeal, 39 is the replacement.
I think what Mr. Saris is saying, we need to look at the replacement before we do a repeal.
That's fine with me.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we can make a motion to create the ordinance before we make a motion to repeal?
Sure you can.
Okay.
You could make a motion for, approve the first reading of ordinance number 1939.
Can we make a motion to accept these three documents as a report? And then that opens up the opportunity to discuss all three things presented to us? And then in that discussion, there could be further motions made to,
You could do that as well.
Well, I thought we could have a discussion about the recommendation and then decide if we want to make a motion or not.
James, let's follow your, y'all good with his course of action?
fine, as long as we get the, as long as we're discussing before we're voting. All right.
James, make a motion.
I make a motion to accept the staff recommendation for reorganization of Parks and Rec dated September 23rd, 2019, and as attachments, ordinance number 1, now renumbered 1938, and ordinance number 2, now renumbered 1939, as presented.
Motion, do we hear a second?
Second.
Got a second. Now we're in discussion. Discuss away.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do, I want to make a comment first. I think what you did, Stephen and staff, was really good on the new ordinance, the repealed one. You know, there's nothing to talk about there. But I thought we ought to, it's a real important time in our history here to kind of walk through it, and it's not a really long document. And there's a few things I just think would be better if we could clarify them, or at least, you know, question where we're at on it. And all this is being done by this commissioner, and I think these other commissioners are with me, because we want to have the best Parks and Rec for the size community that we have, and we do want our partners over at the physical court to be part of it. We don't want it to look like it's a disenfranchisement, franchisement, or however you pronounce that. So anyway, if we could we just go through this a little bit, and if anybody else doesn't have anything picked out, I can just jump to the one places I have questions, unless you want to go through every piece of it. It's up to you guys.
And you're directing your questions at document number 3, newly named, titled 1939. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yes.
All right.
Why don't, in the interest of time, why don't we go directly to your concerns?
Sure. Okay, so, you know, again, you can forgive my ignorance. Maybe this doesn't need to even be in legal documentation, but they're just questions that I think would be asked by our friends across the street. So if we just start with 1016, the created committee is to be known as the City of Danville Parks and Recreation Committee is hereby created. And actually, composition and appointment is where I have a question. 7 appointed members, similar to what they are now. The current board is made up of 3 city appointments, 3 county appointments, and a joint appointment. So if we go to just a city department, I think it would be good if we had different areas of the city represented, and I don't know if we need to word it out that way?
Sure. I would say that there's not a requirement in this ordinance that a committee member be a resident of the city of Danville. We do have certain committees that have that requirement. However, it was not deemed either necessary or advisable or even beneficial to have that type of restriction for this type of committee. So it would generally, it would be the recommendation that you would have as for any committee, a broad spectrum of the community represented, as you would for any committee, whether it be cemetery, streetscape, or parks and recreation.
So we can appoint people that may live outside the city limits?
You certainly may,
Okay.
as
That
we
was one of
do
my
on all
questions.
other committees, with a couple of exceptions.
So anyway, I just wanted to get that across. It may not be applicable to put it in wording, but I think it would be important for the city commission, and we're not always going to be here, to think about that in terms of trying, the master plan was about we're short on parks down the south side of Danville. So I think if you have representation on the board, then you have that
Sure.
voice heard. That's just an example. So I'm bringing it up, and it may be considered if we don't go forward today, that could be something that could be changed in the writing, or maybe it's not apropos. Yeah.
For clarity, though, your suggestion that we increase the
No, keep the 7, but have it,
identify with.
in other words, I don't want to get into a situation where all 7 people are from our neighborhood or Streamland, and so you're not hearing the voices of the whole
Sure.
city.
Okay. So keep 7, but have a variety. Okay, all right.
Could we maybe have someone from each area where there are parks?
I would say it's important that you retain as much discretion in a committee appointment as possible, and that those considerations be looked at every time an appointment is made, as I think you necessarily do for any appointment. However, I don't think it's advisable to, for instance, to divide the county into wards and say we're going to appoint so many from certain districts or something of that
But you would be
nature.
okay adding some language that references we need to make this committee as geographically diverse as possible?
I wouldn't have any objection to that, no.
Okay.
And I would say as a matter of practicality, when service agreements are entered into with certain other public agencies or entities, be it other local school districts or municipalities, for instance, in Junction City or Perryville, I mean, I would think that as a practical matter, you would say, we would like to be able to nominate someone to serve that is from the area from which we have service agreements. But the thing about service agreements is that they can change. So I'm hesitant to write something in stone, as service agreements can come and go.
What else, Commissioner Sayers?
Okay. So we'll jump ahead to section 1021, number 11. This is pretty minor, but provide recommendations on how to provide as wide range. Is that just a typo there, or should it be a range? I just want to get that off my plate, and I'll move on to something more constructive.
I'll correct that, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving down to Article 3.
He shouldn't know he's done his homework anyway.
Is that all you have out of section?
Go ahead, what's
Okay.
the next section?
Yeah, let's see. We're down at 1031 appointment. The Director of Parks and Recreation shall be appointed by the Board of Commissioners for personnel policies. I don't have a problem there. I just have a question. So we're talking about the personnel within Parks and Rec. Does the Director of Parks and Recreation have the ability to hire his or her own staff without scrutiny by the city manager or city commission? How's this staff?
No. Just like your public works director cannot make hires of the public works staff, or the utility engineer cannot hire people to work at the water plant. All hires are made through the city manager's office.
Okay.
Well, consistent with our personnel policies, which sets forth how that operates.
This will operate more like a department head.
Yes.
Yeah.
It will be department head, and I guess more specifically, recommendations are made by the city manager to you for hire. I mean, the hiring is done by the Board of Commissioners for every position at the city.
And just for a matter of reference for the public, that usually comes the city manager to us via recommendation from the department head and through human resources. So there is some scrutiny on that director of that department. And I guess I wanted to bring it up so it's clarified. I think when this, again, when this passes over to the county, they're going to have similar questions, just want to know what's going on, and so I'm asking it for everybody's benefit.
And the employees will be
Pardon me?
city employees also.
I'm sorry?
The employees will be city employees also.
Yeah, yes, okay. So down to 1032, and this is probably answered in my own head, but the powers and duties of the Director of Parks and Recreation shall be per the job description for the position. I would guess we don't have one written yet unless this gets passed. Is that correct? Or
That's correct. This is a very linear process, and there are several steps that need to be taken, none of which are worth the time and effort should you not pass these two ordinances. So one would be an amendment to our classification compensation ordinance to create the position in there. The second would be a creation of the job description that would hopefully mirror or be what is in place now. It would also involve your question about the board. As far as internally, staff has discussed merely a transition to a degree of the current board to the existing board through the nomination of the mayor. We're looking at a transition period here. We're not looking as a matter of a flat out just.
One important note
Yeah.
here regarding the job description. When the Parks and Recreation Board asked in January that the city take the lead in seeking applications for that position, we developed a job description that was used in the advertising and recruitment of the existing director. So that essentially would be similar or identical to that was used early this year.
And so on to my next one, and again, this is just things that I'm pretty sure people are going to ask, public and so forth. So 1033, the Director of Parks and Recreation shall be directly responsible to the city manager. He or she shall report to the city manager and shall take directions and instructions from the city manager. We want the board to do a lot of directive things in terms of programming and so forth. We've stated that in here. So how does staff see it if the board and the city manager have conflicting ideas on?
Well, let's say that happens.
Yeah.
We have recommendations all the time from cemetery committee or streetscape committee. I mean, we want to build all the streetscape improvements 10 years ago, right? I mean, the recommendation is to do them. The problem is budgeting. And so therein lies the recommendations are made to the public, the director. And the director is in the city manager's ear for the recommendations that were made, and you budget towards what needs arise and are there and prioritized. So that happens through a budgeting process and the host of things. But the board itself transitions from an actual policy board to an advisory board, and they make recommendations to the Parks and Recreation Director, who in turn proposes budget ideas to the city managers to be incorporated into the larger budget, just as any department head does.
Okay. I wanted everybody to hear that answer, so I appreciate it. So
Well, let's go. Are you finished?
you can go ahead.
Well, while
Yeah.
you're on 1021, purpose, duties, and responsibilities, I tried to look at the opening paragraph plus all 13 of these duties and responsibilities of the Parks and Rec Committee. And I guess my question was, because I couldn't answer it myself, is that these 13 plus the paragraph do incorporate all of the things that we believe to be items that the Parks and Rec Board have been given direction over, as it currently is identified.
Sure, I would take it a step further to say that we kind of conducted a survey of roles and responsibilities for Parks and Recreation committees that are kind of across the country. And these that are listed here made it to the top, I would say, and I think this is where the document becomes very empowering, I believe. It not only gives guidance, but it gives purpose and direction, which is good for any committee that you're on. But we may want to spend a minute just to review them, because now we say there's a committee, or a board rather, that's just to be over programming and maintenance of the parks. But what type of direction is that?
Yeah.
You know, in this system, to me, it's empowering, and it's a kind of your vision statement of what you would expect out of Parks and Recreation. So yes, it's your charge to the community, but I would take it a step further and say it's your charge to yourselves and to our city, saying this is what we expect out of Parks and Recreation.
Yeah. Lot of direction and information for the committee members
Yes.
currently and those who are going to be appointed later on, so, okay.
And
think it
this
might-
takes the burden of, the burden of personnel issues off of this board and puts them on the city and on the city manager and on us
Sure.
where they belong.
Hiring, firing, contracting,
Yes.
auditing, all of those things would be off the table for the Parks and Recreation folks to have to burden, frankly.
I think
And I guess the other thing that caught my attention is, I'm the new parks director, not John. And it gives me a direct line of communications as to who I'm responsible to answer and to raise questions to. So I really like that part of it.
Well, with regard to these 13 duties, for example, I think our audience might like to know, for example, the first of those, as a charge of the advisory committee, is to review and evaluate current parks and recreation programs and facilities to determine initial need and submit recommendations pertaining to parks and recreation guidelines, policies, and facilities to the Director of Parks and Recreation. I mean, that's essentially what they do now. It's in a slightly reconfigured role, but I mean, there is a lot of specific duties upon this advisory board to the Director of Parks and Recreation, consistent with what is current practice, really.
I wanted to add Commissioner Terry's, even though I've been questioning a lot of things and taking the load off of Parks and Rec. If we go this way, it doesn't matter what government it would be, but we're talking about our government. There's a support factor too that we talked about a lot in ad hoc. Who helps? You know, we're like flipping a coin. Who's going to help them this time instead of we're going to help you. We're going to help you. It's kind of clarified. So with the microphone back in front of my face.
Wait a minute, hold it.
What we don't know, certainly, is physical court's reaction. We want them to support things if we did move forward as a city department. And so the question to my fellow commissioners would be, do we vote tonight or do we wait to see what the reaction is? Because certainly, I think there's a lot of positives that I hope the physical court would see if we went this direction. But I think their initial reaction would not be that. They'd have to let it sink in a little bit, and I could be incorrect, but we've been up here before thinking the same thing about issues. We need a little sink-in time, so I don't think any of those things have been resolved right, that you know of. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what
you
you're
know,
referring to.
currently they give $300,000 to Parks and Rec. That would be a big loss for us, even though we as a city offer Parks and Rec 3 times that, but it doesn't look that way because we're sort of handling our own parks, which you said already is 1 acre bigger than Millennium Park. So but,
I would respond to your question in this manner, that the city speaks through one method, and that is through its vote. So, and what you would be voting on tonight would be to affirm the recommendation of staff, would be a first reading of both ordinances. That requires a second reading. And so there is still a layover period should comments be collected. I will just advise that, you know, there have been times we forward multiple documents for review on this matter. This is not a solution that is novel. It's one that was proposed some time, months, years ago. And so the question is, are you ready to answer that policy question we led with? And if you feel that the best way to deliver the most effective, viable, cost-effective, accountable, responsible Parks and Recreation system is in this manner, then you vote tonight, and the fiscal court will have an opportunity to respond, should they choose to, prior to your second reading. And this is essentially your document. This is not one that necessarily has to have the overview by the court for you to approve. It would be the hope of the city that a service agreement would be entered into like we have on those other agencies that I've remarked about earlier, 911, solid waste, emergency management, and that funding levels would continue.
I guess that's one question I have is, you know, the money we're spending now versus the money you might be spending in the future. And I don't know if we know that or if we can know that. And
Well, you don't necessarily know that. The fact is, you don't know that from year to year in any department, however. And so, to an extent, you do, but you budget what you have. I mean, that's what we do as a city, annually. So you know what your costs are now. You have plans to develop and create some plans for the new fairgrounds property. And so there's going to be future expenditures of funds, and all of this will have to be developed strategically through a plan. But the question is, what is the most effective way to achieve the plan? And if you think this is it, you go for it, and then you budget accordingly and hope that you have the revenue sources to provide the service you want to deliver, which is what every department does.
It seems to me that there's a number of wins in this structure. First and foremost, I think Parks and Rec wins because they get clarification on how are we getting funded, who do we answer to, what's the budget number. There's just a direct line of communication there. Secondly, I think the county wins because they've said all along, excuse me, they've said all along that they can't deal, that they have a hard time really going forward on Parks and Rec because of other pressing issues that they have talked about now for several years. This limits their financial obligation to an extent. I think the city wins in that this is what we do as a city. We provide services. We're already in the grass and flowers and other kinds of business. But I think the biggest win in the whole thing is the public.
Yes, that's
I mean,
right.
that's what the whole thing's about.
Right.
How do we better serve the public?
Yeah, the real essence of reading this over the weekend is that we're saying if 1939 passes, there's no doubt that we're going to have a unified park system and that the city is going to maintain Millennium and everything else. And I think that's the question that needs to be answered to the community, is that we're not abandoning all those other parks. We never have, but we are saying it very officially now that we're not going to.
Well, I think if anything, we're taking it and moving it in the direction,
Yes.
saying not only not abandoning it, but we're going to start to do something with it.
Yes, that's right.
And all the parks will be under the supervision and direction of the Parks and Rec director and his advisory board, or his or her advisory board.
If I may say this too, I'm caught by the fact that I remember a story that has been decades old, and it was on repeat on the Advocate Messenger in their year in review. They addressed two issues for over 10 years, and the first of which was 911, that said this community cannot be stabilized until this issue is resolved. It's too important, it's too critical. The second issue was a repeated article of what's going to happen to the pool this year. Will the city and county be able to agree on how to fund it, who funds it, to what level? Can it get done in time? Will it be open? Will kids swim? Will they won't swim? I will say, and I don't think this is on a limb, that a lot of these issues that we have had in this community have been developed by friction because of format.
No clarity.
The format has been poor. But what we've seen is that when we get in the right format, we have success. And we have seen that with 911. That's a 2-decade-old problem that has run seamlessly well for the prior 2 years. We do it with 911. We've always done it with solid waste management. We do it with emergency management services for this community. My question to you is, why not Parks and Recreation? Why not be in a system that we know works and creates less friction? And also takes something off the Advocate Messenger's top 10 list. This has been a decade problem. And before you is an opportunity. You've studied it for nearly 4 years now.
There's a couple of things I wanted to say. Rick and I sat through that, what'd you call it, ad hoc? I mean, I have another name for it, but that's okay. I understand that the county has some pressing needs that, they just do, that those things come up. But the point I think you all are making, and I agree with, is, do we sit and accept the status quo until that all gets done, when I've been told many times that the status quo is not good enough? I mean, people want more fields, they want more programming, they want more of everything. And so this seems like a way to get there.
I'm good. I appreciate you guys. You took care of most of my closing statements. I'm ready to move on.
All right.
Is that a motion?
There is a
I
motion.
thought we had something else on the
Oh, did we have a
table.
motion? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that.
We have a motion.
Yeah, that's right. We did have a motion on all three.
Let's
Yeah.
call the question on that, and then we can make this.
Okay. I will call the question on the motion made. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right. So that's done.
That was the motion to approve the recommendation of staff.
Right.
So that has been approved and accepted. However, now, before you would be the first reading of 2 ordinances.
Need a motion for that.
You would need a motion for each ordinance separately, please.
I was going to make a motion for first reading of ordinance number 1939 as presented.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
And this is, to remind everybody, the first reading. We still will take any input and opinions before it's a second read.
So, okay. Well, let me ask you a question.
All right.
If we vote on that at the next city commission meeting, do we have 2 ordinances in place?
No, we don't. The effective
what I was
date
gonna
of the replacement ordinance is January 1, 2020.
Okay, thank
The
you.
effective date of the repeal is December 31st, 2019.
And we can do the first reading of the other one tonight as well, right?
You can,
Okay,
yes.
well, that's what my plan.
I got you. Okay, so, shut up, Mike. I call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
No,
We'll do a roll call
We
vote,
have to
please.
do a
Oh,
roll call.
sorry.
Do you need to read it as
Discussion.
well? Or does someone need to read it?
Yeah, you want to read that?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 1939, an ordinance creating a city committee for Parks and Recreation and creating the Office of Parks and Recreation Director so as to replace the repealed Joint City-County Recreation Board in Chapter 10, Parks and Recreation, Article 2, City-County Recreation Board of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Danville, Kentucky.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Atkins,
yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Terry,
Yes.
Mayor Paris,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Cottle.
Yes.
Commissioner Saris.
Yes.
I move for first reading of ordinance number 1938.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
You have to roll call and
Read,
they gotta
please.
read it.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 1938, an ordinance repealing in its entirety the City of Danville, Kentucky Code of Ordinances, creating a joint city-county recreation board in Chapter 10 Parks and Recreation, Article 2 City-County Recreation Board in order to replace it with an ordinance creating a city department for Parks and Recreation.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Terry?
Yes.
Mayor Paris?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Cottle?
Yes.
Commissioner Saris?
Yes.
Commissioner Atkins?
Yes, ma'am. So these are the same thing.
Next item is item 7, report from our city manager, Mr. Scott.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I have 2 items to report on tonight. The first is simply a brief progress or status report regarding the efforts of our search firm, Slavin, to find candidates that are experienced to bring to you for the position of city manager. Our retained firm has conducted outreach to all state management chapters of the International City and County Management Association, as well as to quite a large number of diversity associations that are associated with ICMA regarding this upcoming city manager opportunity in Danville. The firm has emailed each of the state chapter officers of ICMA in each state. They've also done extensive outreach to city managers in 14 states surrounding Kentucky with experience in communities of 24,000 or more. Bob Slavin has sent out 23 personal emails to recent candidates he has worked with in other similar projects. And in total, the firm has sent out over 650 emails related to the search here in Danville. Late last week, 15 resumes had been received. As a result of that outreach effort, we expect some more to be received early this week in advance of the September 25th initial review, initial screening deadline. While that total number of 15, or if it becomes 25, or whatever the number may be, may not seem a large number related to the outreach of over 650 emails, it is a good number, and the firm has confirmed that they have a number of candidates, both male and female, that are experienced, and they consider their qualifications to be high. So they feel pretty good about the initial outreach. The position will be open until filled, so that doesn't preclude anyone from also sending in resumes after the September 25th initial screening review. So that's a pretty good response following that initial month of work. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. The intended goal, as Bob Slavin said to you when the decision was made to hire him, that he believed he could bring to you a successful candidate within 90 days of the initial appointment, which would put that timeline towards the end of November or early December, certainly. So I think that works within our anticipated timeline here. Okay. If there's nothing further on that, I will mention in this.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
It says September 25th was the initial screening deadline.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that the final deadline for
No,
applicants?
just initial. They're going to look at the group they've got in and see if among that set of applicants, they have a smaller number of candidates to bring to you. Now, they may feel good with what they have and say, let's go with this set. I don't know. They're going to probably make a decision in terms of 7, 10, whatever number to forward to you for review.
And then decide whether there will be another,
Well, the applicants
Process.
continue to be inflowing to their office, but they haven't cut those off, but they're going to go with initially what is the first screening of the applicants to meet that 90-day commitment.
right, okay.
Because again, the process will have to be they present to you, There may be, they'll have to do interviews, they have to do
Right.
background checks, a lot of additional work, so they're trying to get on with the process.
I just wasn't clear if that was a final deadline or if we were going to see some and then some more may trickle in.
More will trickle in probably, and they indicated that they will receive those. I don't know specifically when they will forward what set of numbers to you for review, but
Okay.
I think
That
it
was
is
my other
coming.
question.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to spend a little bit of time going over the question of ethics in our community. And I'll preface this by just saying that 25 years ago, in 1994, the General Assembly passed changes to KRS 65 that required local governments, both city and county, to adopt ethics ordinances, and they also applied to other special districts and more after that to special purpose governmental entities and so forth. So we have statutory requirements that local governments adopt ethics requirements, and those apply to both elected and appointed staff. Now, I had, while I was at a healthcare management training meeting last week in Cincinnati on September the 10th, that evening I received an email from an individual in this community who made a general inquiry about how an ethics concern could be brought forward in the community. We had a brief flurry of emails which clarified that the ethics concerns related to the reported actions of Mayor Mike Paris on September the 10th during a meeting of the Boyle County Fiscal Court. In a September 16th email to that individual, I made these points, and I think some of these may have been reported in our newspaper. I did acknowledge receipt of an email, and I confirmed that I, city manager, would, as a matter of priority, look into that question, both as it might apply to the city's personnel policy and also to the city's adopted ethics code. So I made that commitment and have done so these past few days. I also confirmed with the sender of that email that it was my understanding that his request that I look into this matter did not constitute a request that the matter be brought before or forwarded to the city's ethics board because it did not meet the format required for a complaint to be brought to the ethics board, which is in essence a signed letter of complaint by an individual. This was simply a general inquiry. I advised that individual that if he wished to make an ethics complaint, he could again contact me, and I'd provide him with that address, or I didn't say this, or I would file the complaint with the ethics board on his behalf, but it had to be in the proper format. So there were two areas of a general inquiry. First of all, we going back 25 years ago, we sometimes forget really the details of our ethics board, how they operate, and so forth. They could, on their own initiative, bring forth an investigation of any matter that they deem to be improper in our community, either as a result of actions of city or county government officials, elected or appointed, or other local governments. They also respond and are required to respond to written letters of complaint, none of which have been filed. If after an ethics board investigation, there is a conclusion reached that the individual that's being complained about did in fact breach the ethical standards, the ethics board can in some cases levy fines or simply make the determination that a section of the ethics code not relating to financial matters, if it was breached, they can simply say that it is and refer it back to the governing body of the city or the county. In this case, I'd say the city. And the city commission could take action. Now, it's inappropriate for me as city manager to comment upon those events because I wasn't at the courthouse that day, and certainly whether it was or was not present, it's inappropriate for me to comment on any matter that could be subject to an Ethics Committee investigation. I'm just outlining really the process that would be followed if a complaint were filed. And again, to my knowledge, no complaint alleging violations of the city's ethics code has been filed with that ethics board. The second matter of general inquiry is our personnel policies. And we last, as you might recall, updated those in July of this year. We made a number of required conforming changes to state law, stating that we would provide women that might have young children to nurse with privacy options to do that, and some other conforming changes, as well as some additional changes that I recommended. But those were adopted, and our long-standing personnel policy requirement is that we operate an organization and environment that is non-discriminatory on a whole range of measures. So it's nothing new for us to say that you shall not discriminate, you shall not harass sexually or otherwise. We've had those policies for years. While most of those elements of the personnel policies do not apply to elected officials, but rather to staff, the section of our personnel policies pertaining to workplace harassment and sexual discrimination specifically do apply to the Board of Commissioners. These prohibitions apply to all officers, elected officials, appointed officials, volunteers of our committees, for example, vendors, contractors, and employees of the city in all locations of the city, and all persons outside of city employment who interact with city officers and employees, including, as I say, vendors and customers. So it's a far-reaching sort of non-discriminatory policy with regard to workplace harassment or sexual discrimination. Now, under our adopted personnel policies, if any person within city employment or outside of city employment who interacts with any of our city officers, employees or vendors, volunteers, et cetera, who believe that they have been discriminated against, our policies provide for the solution, other than the potential of filing a lawsuit outside of our control or remedy, is to file a written grievance with the city manager stating the particular facts of the incident, and our form has on there any suggested remedy that would satisfy that aggrieved person. And the city manager then investigates and attempts to resolve the grievance, if possible. Sometimes these grievances are not related to sexual harassment or workplace issues, but they can cover a variety of things that might occur within the city. And from time to time, I do have grievances that I have investigated and tried to resolve to remedy the situation. If I'm unable to resolve any grievance filed with me, I do bring it to the City Commission for their final determination, because you uphold the personnel policies. I'm simply the administrator acting in that joint role with you, but you have the final determination. So I mention all of this because I would say again, to date, a grievance on the incident at the courthouse has not been filed with me at City Hall, so there is nothing I can do further with regard to that matter, just as there is nothing I can do further with regard to the potential of a ethics charge. Now, in preparation for this discussion, or in anticipation of it, Mayor Paris and I did talk, and he has prepared a statement that he would like to read to the public and to the City Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. This letter is dated September the 23rd, 2019. To my fellow city commissioners, as mayor of Danville, it is my responsibility to be a role model and leader regarding the type of behavior that is to be demonstrated in our community. In a recent public meeting, I was wrong to respond to a previous comment made to me. I have previously apologized for my actions in that incident. Please note that I completely support the role of women being equals in any endeavor. We are past the days of accepting demeaning comments or actions aimed at others, both men and women. We are equal. We should be treated equally and with respect to each other. The Danville City Commission's adopted policies demonstrate that our goal is to create and maintain a work environment free of unlawful discrimination and harassment, including sexual harassment. The city annually holds education and training for all employees, including managerial and supervisory personnel, concerning discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, and diversity. This training was last held August 21st and 22nd, 2019 for all city employees. And at that time, the City Commission requested that they also be provided this training. That training is scheduled to be provided to the Danville City Commission at the Intercounty Energy Building on October 16th from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. I will be there. I understand all of our city commissioners will be there. Our colleagues at the fiscal court have also indicated they plan to attend. As mayor, I'm apologizing for my actions to the City Commission and also to all of our employees and to the community. It is my hope that from this incident and with the scheduled training, we will all develop a better understanding of what it means to provide equal treatment for all, both in the workplace and in our community. Respectfully to all, G. Michael Paris.
This really concludes my report because administratively, I have,
Can I make one little
Yes, sir.
statement?
Yes, sir.
In response to the mayor? And Mayor, we do appreciate your apology. And I'm speaking, I haven't talked to the rest of the commission, but I'm assuming and betting that we would all agree we didn't condone or the words or your actions. Diversity is an important part of this workplace and all workplaces. It's beneficial, and it's important that all people feel equal in the workplace and when they're dealing with public officials. And I think that's a reminder for all of us that we need to bear in mind.
Thank you, sir. Anything else?
I would just like to say thank you for your apology, and I would just like for everyone to remember that every elected official is still human.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I'd like to make a comment too that, things do happen. I've put my foot in my mouth several times sitting at this place doing a public meeting. I appreciate the fact that you have attempted to get out in front of this, and I think it's really important that we understand that your apology is not just to the City Commission, but to all of our employees and to our entire community, and that we do desire to move forward from this, and we pray that you've learned a lesson as well as we've learned a lesson from this incident as well.
Rick, you're the odd man out.
Let's move forward.
Okay.
I didn't know you were human.
Do we need to make a motion to accept this letter of apology?
You'd be free to do so if you wanted to. You wouldn't be required to necessarily. But if the commission would like to do that as a body, that,
Well, I think it was if we were to do it as a body, it would hopefully say to our community that we have addressed this issue, and this is how we've attempted to address it as well as to resolve it.
I like it. So the motion would be to accept the mayor's apology into the record, is that?
yes.
on behalf of the city commission, and it's addressed to all of our employees, and addressed to our entire community.
What we said.
Yeah.
And perhaps the city manager's recitation of the workplace non-discrimination policies of the city.
I like it.
Who made the motion?
Both of us.
Did you make the motion?
Okay.
You seconding the motion?
Yeah, I'll accept it, yes.
Discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Anything else, Mr. Scott?
No, sir.
Okay. As promised, we are moving to that section called Hear the Public. This is the public's opportunity to take 3 minutes at the podium on any subject that is not on tonight's agenda.
Or less.
Huh?
3 minutes or less. My time.
I'll let you say that. Wilma, ladies first.
Bring the microphone back, right?
Mr. Horn stepping like a phone, right? Oh.
This isn't on, so I don't know what I'm
You're
doing.
on.
I am on.
You
Okay,
are
I am
on.
on. I'm Wilma Brown. I wanted to just for a moment talk about the $75,000 that you have just allocated for a consultant to talk about the economic development and marketing of our downtown. But I also want to remind you tonight of some projects that we take for granted now that were not recommended by any consultant. They were not instigated by any branch of government. They had no state or federal affiliation, and yet they came about. They came about in the minds first of historically bold individuals in our community that had a good idea, perhaps refined those ideas among a few friends or colleagues, and they became realities in our community. These are things that not only enhance the community, but they bring about economic vitality also, especially downtown. I've jotted down some of these. Great American Brass Band Festival, the Barbecue Festival, the Art Center of the Bluegrass, Soul of 2nd Street Festival, the Industrial Foundation, the Great American Dollhouse Museum, the 2002 campaign for alcohol sales in restaurants, West T Hill Community Theater, Pioneer Playhouse, the Arts Commission's commitment to art exhibits and gallery hops, even the Danville Tree Project. Also, our public library, and we forget this, was not a public library at first. It was started by one family, one individual thinking it was a good idea in our community. And I also want to include that every single retail store, every single restaurant downtown was started by one individual, each one working hard and trying to bring about improvement in the community. So sometimes I think that some things are very obvious and in front of us, and I think maybe the city sometimes should pay more attention to the individuals in our town who do have good ideas and have given their time and their energy and even their financial commitment to making this a better place. So I thank you for listening tonight.
Thank you, Wilma. Yes, sir.
My name is Randy Gibb Graham. In arguably another example of opportunistic overkill, chairpersons, both former and current, of local entities seem to highlight hypocrisy in emails obtained through open records from city and county governments by newspapers. In what seems a coordinated attack, both current and past EDP chairpersons simultaneously sent emails to our judge executive and city manager regarding what's been called Anklegate. Is this even a position the Economic Development Partnership would weigh in on? Did the board vote on these words? After stating the obvious, the current EDP chairman called for meaningful conversation within our community to foster inclusive behavior. Well, that's what I'm here for. Then, describing himself as an HR professional who has worked with diverse employers, former EDP chairman wrote an email to both city and county, "I'm writing on behalf of concerned citizens," and suggesting the mayor be formally censured, disciplined, up to and including termination for misconduct. And bringing up all these things, ethics violations, regarding ethics violations. Will throw up. As a representative as well of the concerned citizens, I have some questions. Where were such attitudes when the president of our EDP lied to this community and local business owners regarding neutrality in Main Street lane reduction while an email calling local business owners and citizens names, such as insignificant fringes? Where should such actions rate on a professional scale? Was inaction complicit in unprofessional behavior? There were no calls for immediate dismissal or sensitivity training for the president of the EDP. Neither was there public apology. Hypocrisy? The tourism director also participated in this backdoor operation while serving on the EDP board. Why were there no calls of censure or culture, diversity, and inclusion training from the tourism directors or EDP's boards when the tourism director referenced Turtle Man Ernie Brown, stating, "We don't want anyone representing Danville with no teeth"? Wasn't Brown of male gender? Harassment? Hypocrisy? Our judge executive voluntarily called a press conference admonishing the magistrate announcing diversity training. When did the Convention and Visitors Bureau or EDP do the same for their own? Complicit in unprofessional behavior? Considering our mayor has stood up and led speaking out against questionable past EDP actions, does this have more to do with political strategy? While attempts to equate the mayor's words to the magistrate seems reminiscent of the EDP gaffe gift that keeps on giving, it may have more to do with our mayor leading the way in making the EDP board more fair and equal, thus reducing the power and control both the EDP president and chairman had previously held on their board in our community. Cast out the beam from thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly the speck in our brothers?
Mr.
It
Graham,
seems hypocrisy. I'm not over 3 minutes. I've timed this.
We've crossed the 3-minute time.
Sir, we have not. Well, from authors of these people, I think there should be no action taken against the mayor.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Hahn? Seeing none, we'll move right into commissioner comments. I have one. I think it was Tuesday, 2 weeks ago, this coming Tuesday. Tourism directors were in town, and at the request of Martha Kaywood, the city's representative on Bluegrass Ad, asked me to go by. They were meeting at the Great American Dollhouse. So I'm going to give you a plug. If you haven't been there at the Great American Dollhouse, or if you have been and you haven't been in the last 5 years, it's something to be seen. I have to give you credit, and you are one of those individuals that has put their own capital out there, and thank you for what you do. Anyone else?
I would just like to mention we will be traveling to Covington for the next several days for Kentucky League of Cities training.
All right. And we will be there starting tomorrow.
Yes.
All right. Anyone else?
Well, we just finished up last Friday, but really it continues all the way through. So this Friday, the Frank X. Walker Literary Festival, and I want to give a shout out to Miss Jane Dewey and Danville High School and Citizens Concerned for Human Relations and the City Commission, and for all of the volunteers who volunteered or got drafted to go into the elementary, middle, and high school to read to our students. And a shout out to Coach Clevenger, because we had about 20-some senior football players in their football jerseys. Really impacted the elementary schools, and the kids were, they were great readers and were able to answer a lot of questions about what they read to the kids, but also able to answer a lot of questions about the recent football plays or lack of football plays. But really a good week. And Frank, I guess Frank saw 2,000 students in one day. Wow. Did all of Bate Middle School, and did all of Danville High School, got all the juniors at Bull County, and did the advanced AP literature classes at Danville High School. And then Thursday night, he read to, I guess, about 100 of us his most recent writings, and they were very personal because they were all about characters, people we recognize from Danville. And then that morning at 9:30, Message Theater did an excerpt from the piano lesson in August Wilson play. And it was, I guess they hold 700 seats, so Boyle County Middle School, Bate Middle School, Danville High School's juniors, Danville Christian Academy, and not Child Development Center, Woodlawn out here, and the alternative school. All those 8th and 11th graders throughout the community were in Danville High School for an hour-long production, and it was amazing. When it was over, I said, last question, it's almost time for lunch. That never happens, but the kids were really engaged, asked lots and lots of questions. So thank you for your support. Money well spent.
Anyone else?
Always a lot of great things happen in our community, and I certainly don't know them all, but Constitution Run for the Arts, which is sponsored by Danville Bike and Footwear and the Art Center of the Bluegrass, went over very well. They doubled their numbers this year from last year's participation by moving from a Saturday morning to a Sunday afternoon, and a big shout out to Danville Police Department on behalf of those organizers for helping close down the streets. We occupy Main Street for close to, well, actually for almost an hour. We occupy Main Street, and so it's a major artery here, and that's a lot of work for our police department. And I would say for those folks, thank you, Tony, and your crew. Appreciate that. The other thing that went over well, and that just happened this past weekend, is one of the big fundraisers for the Humane Society, the Pup Crawl, or the Pints for Pups, and they have a couple of different names, but they entered the Cornhole Tournament, and that was a big success using our Weisiger Park, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I also want to give a shout out to the engineering department over at the water plant. They got our nice water trailer over there so people weren't wilting in the sun, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I need to give a shout out also to the Danville Police Department. So I'm going to tell on myself. I got stopped out by the South Danville Manor, and it wasn't for speeding. Sorry, y'all, but it was because my sticker had expired. I know y'all have never had that happen.
It wasn't for erratic driving either?
And I have to say, he came up. He didn't know who I was, and that's fine. He came up and he said, "Oh, sir," he said, your sticker's expired." And I said, "Thank you for telling me that." And he said, and we're handing out these coupons. And it was a coupon, I think it was to Sonic or Dairy Queen or something. And I said, "How long have you been doing that?" And he said, "Well, we've been doing it a while," which shows that I don't get pulled over very often, but another story. But Chief, that's a super fine move. I appreciate that very much, and you catch more flies with honey. Mm-hmm. So, good job.
Thank you, Mayor, for reminding me that the success of Hot Dog Day.
Oh yeah.
Constitution Square. They had a lot of folks show up down there, and they too offer coupons to participate in the Parks and Recs programs when they come by. And I think what you're doing, John, is a great thing. People are starting to recognize it, and the feedback I'm getting from John and his staff is some people didn't even know we had some of these parks. Constitution they did. They didn't know about White's Park. So that was a really good thing.
Anything else? If not, we'll move right into payment of the bills. Do I hear a motion for the payment of the bills?
I'll move for approval of the bill list dated September 23rd, 2019, in the amount of $245,839.97.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cottle. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Item 9, thank you, Ms. Sumner, for being so patient. We are going to move into improvements to Weisiger Park. The floor is yours.
Set on. That might help you. I don't think it's.
I don't know. No, it's not on.
We shouldn't hold it.
We may have a,
There you go. I think I saw a light come on.
Yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah,
Oh, there it is.
there you go.
Okay. It has been brought to Branstetter Carroll's attention through some conversations with some of you, staff, citizens, and so on, that the fountain at the corner of Weisiger Park has underperformed the original expectation of this august body. And so our actions we have taken is Branstetter Carroll about a month ago recommended.
Went off again.
made in the new battery. Now it's back
Oh,
on.
now it's on.
It's your touch.
Thank you. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, Branstetter Carroll provided 5 strategies to upgrade that fountain to staff. Those strategies were conversed about, and there was one standout, which happens to be the most difficult one, of course, but it's the one that we believe would provide the most satisfaction. I'm going to describe that, what that is going to involve. Branstetter Carroll is going to, before I describe that, the intent here is for us to provide these engineering services at no cost, essentially as a continuation of the original design, since the city was not satisfied with that design. And then we are going to work alongside staff to get bids, and some of the work might be self-performed. Some might be done by outside contractors. That's yet to be determined. But we will provide the details necessary to the staff to get those bids, and we'll be able to report back to you as to the status of that in approximately 1 month. So what the intention here is to do is to remove the bowl. It's been requested that the bowl the City of Danville maintain ownership of that bowl, and that it go out to the water plant and be reused in some capacity. Additionally, the Weisiger ring will remain in place. It will be protected during construction. The dirt and such, the substrate will be removed, and approximately 3 feet inside the Weisiger ring, we will pour a concrete shaft, if you will. The depth of that is not yet determined, but the height of it will be approximately between 2 and 3 feet higher than the Weisiger ring. That structure will need to be brick-faced and have a cast stone cap on it in order to match the Weisiger ring and the planter bed ring that's in the center of the park. So the styling of that will all be matching and look original to the park. What this means is that the height of the new inner bowl that we're going to pour with concrete could be as high as 5 feet off of the finished ground level. That will all be concealed with plants, of course, in the summertime, those giant begonias. The width of that body of water will be between 8 and 9 feet across. And that diameter is important because the height of the water, which is where all of your interests lie, can be the height of that spray can be equal to the diameter of the pool, because you have to have room for the oversplash to happen. So essentially what I'm telling you is we believe we can achieve anywhere from a 6 to 8 foot high spurt of water, in addition to the already several feet it would be above the ground. And that will make, I believe, the impact that was originally sought. In order to do that, we have to install a pit similar to what is operating the water curtain. And we've already talked with Mr. Coffey about this. We've identified sources of electricity, water, and those kinds of things. So at a later time, approximately a month from today, we'll be able to come back with more detailed scenarios for that. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, though I may not know all the answers yet. But that's the strategy that we're going to move forward with.
Questions?
Just, will there be an artist rendering or anything before?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm more of a visual person.
I know, yes. I tried to explain it and
Oh,
take my
you
time,
did.
but
You did a good job.
not everyone can extrapolate that way.
Is there a timeline on this?
Not yet.
Okay.
There will be one. Yes, we've just concluded that this is a good strategy a week ago. So, yeah, this is a new idea here that we've got to make happen.
Well, with winter coming on, certainly would like to have this signed, sealed, and delivered by 1st of April. I don't know if you want to run a fountain in the wintertime. I mean, I guess you can. They do. But
You can?
so in that case, sooner the better.
All right. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're glad you're back on the project.
Is it being modeled after something in existence?
And Ms. Sumner, you don't have to stay. I know you can. You're welcome to.
Thank you. I might
I certainly understand.
I wanted to ask her a question, but I don't want
Oh, we have a question.
No, no, it's not a public question, no.
Oh,
Ready to
okay.
open that up.
Mr. Castle, engineering report, please.
I'll try not to take that long. Just for the engineering report, Mayor, Commissioners, public. So far, we've gotten a lot of stuff done this past summer. Just reporting on a lot of things that we have a lot of effect on, a lot of things that we don't have a lot of effect on, starting which the Main Street marking and the lane reduction. When we leave tonight, you'll probably see construction vehicles out there working. They're going to pick up paving from West Lexington and Maple and start working their way to Main and then turning down this way, continuing down to First. They're going to finish milling over towards First. And the milling should be done tonight, paving possibly done tonight, more than likely tomorrow night. And they're going to try to keep doing the striping as they go, but there might be a lot of other things they've got to do, small things to continue on to clean up, but the major part of the work is going to be finished in the next few days, hopefully. Regarding streetscape, they've completed most of the sidewalk, curb, and entrance work. Lawhorn Electric's installed all the poles. We just have another issue waiting for something from our Canadian suppliers of the poles, that we can't energize the poles till the handhold covers have been delivered. They were not delivered with the rest of the poles. So once we get those in, we'll be able to energize those and hopefully have some light out there we've been doing without for so long. For the Davis building next door here, they'll be fabricating the handrails for the porch and hopefully getting that in soon too, but I don't really have a timeline for that. The splash pad, since opening August 22nd, it seems to be pretty busy. The only thing we're looking at is we're flexible on a closing date, either end of the month or middle of October, depending on any other direction, just depending on the temperature and stuff. We'll say open as late as the kids showing a lot of interest in it, so as much as we can. The problem we've got is we have to build the concrete overflow for the spillway instead of the rock that's there now. Although the kids have been having a lot of fun going between spray and the rock and the mud, we've got to fix the rock so it doesn't erode so much. But we prefer doing that before the cold weather hits, so that's why we've got to try to squeeze that in. Cemetery master plan update and small projects. We've kicked off the update on September 12th, and John Carmen is finishing up gathering information on that, and he'll be getting back to us again in another meeting shortly. Public Works sidewalks and projects. Public Works has been busy repairing, replacing sidewalks and utility repairs all over town, so you don't really see a lot of what they do, but they stay busy doing that all the time. And they take time off of that to do the bigger projects and then always have those to fill in whenever they've got time for it. We're getting bids from small contractors to help us on the sidewalks down at the 2nd Street Bridge and a few other locations, so we're going to be moving on that stuff too. They're beginning to patch potholes and preparing for stormwater structure cleaning and leaf collection. Also, we're starting to look at, we've got the money funding the Public Works garage renovation. We have to review the drawings for that and try to get started on that as well. Wayfinding, now that the other jobs have been so time-consuming for the last couple of months, we'll be able to start concentrating on getting the encroachment permits started on those, and then we can drop back to the other issues while we're waiting for those to be approved, however long that takes. We have major storm structure issues in a few areas that we'll be looking at over the winter. Streamland Stormwater Investigation, we had their last public meeting to gather information August 27th, and we're hoping to be moving on that with their recommendations when they get them to us. Also starting on the Fall Street paving list, after these guys get done out here, they might even hit Church Street over here while they're nearby, but otherwise they'll be getting the list that we've got shown on there as soon as they can. Henson Trail, Matt Souter's been busy this summer doing demo and a lot of other things too. He's kept on that as much as he could, and he's got the right-of-way, the route marked pretty well, and you can walk it and everything, but he's only got parts of it worked out, rocked down, and the rest of the work to be done, but he's still pursuing that. And last thing is we're also along the line of the Wayfarer projects. We've not forgotten about the request for bike racks downtown, and we'll be pursuing that too through the fall. Any questions?
How, I should know, how far are they going to go down Main with the blacktop?
First Street. It was going back and forth with 3 different references that we'd gotten from people, but as of this morning, the Allen construction foreman was telling me he's milling to First. And actually, they already did on the sides, all the way down to First. They'll finish it up. You'll see the results of it. But I'm glad they got that far. It would have looked funny if they'd stopped in the middle of downtown. So that'll look better that way.
And the various crews that have been out working have been very courteous and willing to help any way they can.
And Alan's been good about asking for help from the police department. They've been helping too, to help control traffic and help people that have any issues and stuff. So it's been working out pretty good with Allen Construction. I appreciate their efforts.
Thank you, sir.
John, I appreciate you doing this report. It's good for all of us and the public to get updated, and there's a lot going on, and we appreciate the work you do. I have a couple of questions on the paving project. Anything going to happen going down 4th Street from Main, 1 block down that's pretty beat up? Do you know anything about that? Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah. The first thing I'd heard from the Allen Construction rep was that the usual way they do this is all they'll do is go down to the end of the radius, but then when they were milling, they haven't done that, so I'm not sure if the state directed them something else. But all I've seen is they're just going straight across parallel to Main Street.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth questioning and asking about. I mean, we've all been on it. It's at a point where it's going to throw a car off to the side. There's some pretty big holes there.
It's another issue. We just got to revisit repaving the areas and stuff. So.
Is 3rd Street,
We've gotten 1st Street, but-
is 3rd Street between Main and Broadway on the state's radar at all?
Well, I can't say it's not on the radar, but it's not part of this project, not at all.
And last question for me is, when do the original project, forget what I asked, when will it be completed? Do you have any timeline there? I think the paper may have reported November 2nd. I thought that was pretty long.
I don't know what Natasha was meaning by that date, other than that might have been the overall contract date, and Alan's just been able to do it faster. It may have been a range of dates for them to do the work in, but my conversations with Alan, they always expect it to be about a week of work, depending on the weather and equipment breakdowns, supply and stuff like that.
Hey, John, shouldn't we have some conversation with District 7 about 3rd Street and 4th Street? It makes no sense for them.
I'm about to say, I'm sure Earl's already talked to them before in previous years, so.
Pull off the job, you know they're gonna come back and do it, they gotta bring all the machines
Yeah.
back, costs go up.
Yeah.
We have not heard anything from them this season, but as far as this, they've been focused primarily on Maine, but we'll take that up tomorrow morning and see how they would react.
It would be in their best interest economically.
Yeah, we agree.
We need
Just
to-
for the block, the first
we need-
block at least.
Right.
Yeah.
And then on wayfinding, encroachment permits, how long does that take? I mean, this thing's been kind of rolling for a
I'm
while.
not that familiar with it.
Okay.
It's something new for me, but the last one we did took them 3 years, but I don't think it'll take them that long this time.
Hope
That
not.
was- that was
We'll
for
have to
the-
change our sign design if it takes that long.
That was for the ADA sidewalk in front of the high school. It was a year or two to get back to us, and Earl resubmitted it, and they approved it in a year after that, so.
Thank you, sir. There's no other business to come before us. I entertain a motion that we move into executive session. Kevin?
Why for are we going into executive session?
I would mention that we need to discuss property acquisition, litigation, and personnel matters.
All right. I move and we go into executive session for personnel reasons pursuant
find it?
to KRS 618101F and for property acquisition where the publicity at the present stage might or would likely affect the value per KRS 618101B, if y'all are keeping up. And the last one was litigation?
Which one?
Is it pending or is it? Move we go into executive session to discuss pending litigation for which disclosure of details might compromise litigation posture pursuant to KRS 618101C. There'll be a quiz.
So we have a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. In executive session.
7.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are in regular session.
Staff would ask that you promote Detective Kevin Peel to the position of major in the police department.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
We would also ask that you promote Sergeant Josh Faulkner and Sergeant Jonathan Mullins to the position of captain in the police department.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we would ask that you move Heidi Lowry to the position of administrative assistant in the fire department with the usual probationary measures.
Motion, somebody?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Then we would ask that you hire Joshua Ryder and Dakota Mattingly to the position of firefighter recruit with the usual probationary measures.
So moved.
Motion's made and seconded.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we would also ask that you hire Miranda Collins to the position of finance clerk with the usual probationary measures.
So moved.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
And accept the
Motion carries.
Accept the resignations of Braden Hoppard, Stephen DeBoard, and Robin Rogers.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Is there any further business to come before this body?
Ashley, you get all that? That was quick. It was rolling. Look, she didn't raise her hand up.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.